Today, I'm going to tell you 3 progressively more horrifying stories that at the end of each of them, I'm going to show you the picture or pictures that are famously associated with that particular story. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all I do, and I upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. If that's of interest to you, then please move into the top floor of a high-rise apartment building that does not have a working elevator, and then ask the like button to help you move. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. On March 20th, 1980, significant volcanic activity began to occur all over Mount St. Helens in Washington state. The north face of the mountain had begun to visibly shake, and then by March 27th, there was steam coming out of the craters and vents all over the north side of the mountain. That April, scientists began to notice that there was this massive bulge that was growing on the north side of this mountain that was about 1 mile in diameter, and every day it was growing about 6 feet farther and farther up the mountain. And it was basically this massive undercurrent of magma that was going towards the top of the mountain, getting ready to explode. Initially, there was some speculation that perhaps this magma bulge is not nearly as big of a deal as people are making it out to be, that really at worst it could be a small eruption and it would have no impact on the surrounding areas. But authorities became skittish and were worried that they could just be caught with their pants down if this turned into a full-blown volcanic eruption. So they began evacuating the area. And for the most part, everybody evacuated, with the exception of a few scientists and some photographers and some really hardcore people that did not want to leave their homes. One of those people who had stayed behind was Robert Landsberg, who was a photographer, and on May 18th, 1980, he was out hiking about 7 miles away from the summit of Mount St. Helens, and he was making his way up to try to find a good viewpoint of that north face. He wanted to look at that magma surge that was making its way up on the north side of the mountain. And so finally he makes his way up and he gets to a great spot and he starts taking pictures of that north face. While Robert is taking pictures of that side of the mountain, a 5.2 magnitude earthquake struck the area, causing that entire north face of Mount St. Helens to be sheared off and begin falling down the side of the mountain. It's this massive landslide. It's one of the biggest that's ever been recorded in that area. But what it really did is all of a sudden that entire magma surge that had been building up underneath on the north side, making its way up, suddenly is uncovered, and it causes this massive volcanic explosion shooting 15 miles straight up into the air. Along with this massive vertical blast, there was a simultaneous lateral blast basically pointed directly at Robert, and it sent these molten debris surging down the mountainside at 100 miles an hour or faster. Robert knew he had no hope of escaping this wall of magma and ash coming straight at him. So he decides, instead of trying to save myself, I'm going to take as many pictures as I can of this volcanic eruption, and then I'm going to try to protect the film. And so Robert took as many pictures as he could of this massive volcanic wall of death coming towards him until the very last second when he puts his camera into his bag, he puts that into his backpack, and then he holds it against his chest and lays down on the ground using his body as the last protective measure to try to save this film for posterity. 17 days later, they find Robert Landsberg's body, and sure enough, he was able to protect his film by laying on top of it. And so they developed the pictures that he took, and they're incredible. Here are the final pictures that Robert Landsberg took before he was killed by the volcano. On September 21st, 2014, Darsh Patel, who was a 22-year-old college student, was out hiking in a New Jersey state park along with 5 of his college buddies. As they were about to head down a particular trail that they had actually gone to this park to go down, a man and woman come charging up the path towards them. And so Darsh and his friends stop, and they're looking at these 2 people who look totally distraught and scared. And the man and woman immediately say, "Hey, don't go down this path. We were just down there, and for the past 10 minutes, a black bear has been stalking us in the tree line. We don't know where it went, but we got up here, we turned around, and it was gone, but we would not suggest going down this path. It's just not worth it." Darsh and his friends tell the couple, "Thank you for giving us the heads up. We were actually going to go down that path, and so I guess now we won't." And so the couple, they quickly leave, and Darsh and his friends are sitting there thinking, well, now what do we do? Because this was the trail we were going to go down. This is why we're here. As they're standing there, they start talking about, well, maybe we just go down anyways. You know, there's 6 of us. I highly doubt that a bear is going to come out of the woods and attack 6 people, especially a black bear that is not known to attack people. Why don't we just walk down a ways, and if we see the bear, then we just turn around and leave. And if we see the bear, might make some good pictures. Let's just go down there and see what happens. And they start walking. And sure enough, about 10 minutes into their trip down this trail, they see this massive bear parked right in the center of the trail, about 250 meters away from where they were. The bear did not appear to be doing anything. It was just sitting there, but it was clearly looking at the group of them. So Darsh and his friends are just standing there, not really sure what to do, so they start taking pictures and videos. They're not moving any closer, but they just start documenting what they're seeing because this bear was apparently stalking this couple. It was pretty interesting, and they figured, hey, make some good pictures. So they start taking pictures and taking some videos of this animal, and the animal starts walking towards them. Now it's 250 meters away. They recognize that this is a dangerous animal, and we don't want to get too close to it, but they felt relatively safe. Even if it started moving towards them initially, they still felt safe. But the animal starts jogging towards them. At this point, the boys put their phones away, turn around, and they start hightailing it the other way. And somebody looks back and notices the bear is now sprinting at them. This causes the group to completely panic. They start sprinting back towards where their cars were parked. Absolute full panic back up the trail. No one's paying attention to anybody else. They're just running for their lives. And as they're turning their heads to look, the bear is gaining on them and gaining on them. Finally, after about 10 minutes of just running for their lives, they make it to the parking lot and they turn around. There's no bear, but there's short one hiker. Darsh Patel is still in the forest somewhere. The group starts screaming for Darsh. They know there was this aggressive bear in there chasing them, so they're obviously worried about him potentially getting attacked, and so they immediately call 911. The police show up and park rangers show up, and they go into the forest to try to find this bear and to find Darsh. And very quickly they come across this bear in a clearing, this 300-pound bear all by itself, aggressively pacing around this lump in the middle of this clearing that had sticks and branches on it. It wasn't clear what it was, and this bear is just pacing in a circle around this thing. And as these 2 park rangers get closer, they're armed. The bear looks at them and makes a move like it's going to charge, and they elect to shoot and kill this bear. Later, the bear's remains would be taken to a laboratory, and inside of the bear's stomach was Darsh Patel. He had been killed and eaten by this bear, and that lump that was on the ground that the bear was circling was whatever was left of Darsh that had not been consumed yet. When they recovered Darsh Patel's phone, they went into his images, and they found he had taken one final picture before he was attacked. Here it is. The bear was not malnourished, it was not diseased, it just decided it wanted to stalk, kill, and eat a human. Vladimir Komarov was a Soviet astronaut who in 1967 was scheduled to orbit the Earth in the first manned flight of a particular Soviet spacecraft called the Soyuz. Komarov would be flying this mission solo, and so he needed a backup in case for some reason he couldn't go. And his backup was Yuri Gagarin, who was actually Komarov's best friend. This mission was very important to the Soviet Union, more from a political standpoint, but nonetheless, the pressure was on Komarov to successfully complete this mission. And so he, along with his backup, Yuri, had to train extra hard and make sure they did not screw this up. But it turns out the fail point for this mission was almost certainly not going to be Komarov or Gagarin if he ended up going instead of Komarov. It was going to be the spaceship itself. Gagarin, along with a host of engineers, did a full-blown inspection of the Soyuz and found 203 significant structural problems, and they all recommended postponement of this mission. But their recommendation was ignored because, again, this mission was so politically important to the Soviet Union that they were effectively ready to risk their astronauts to make it happen. When Komarov found out about all these structural issues and the fact that the powers that be were not even listening and were basically saying, we don't care, you're doing this mission anyways, he was crushed, and he told a KGB agent that he was certain he was going to die. And this KGB agent would later say that he asked Komarov, well then why don't you refuse the mission? And Komarov said, if I refuse the mission, they're going to make my best friend go, and he'll die up there, so I have to go. Gagarin pleaded with Komarov to relinquish the role, let Gagarin go instead of him, but Komarov was staunch. He said, I've been given this mission, I'm going to go, you're going to stay here. But what Komarov did, which is so legendary, is he made sure his funeral, if he were to die in the course of this mission, with the open casket, because he knew if he came back to Earth, it was probably going to be because the spaceship has crashed, and he wanted the Soviet leadership to see what they had done. So sure enough, Komarov gets in the Soyuz on launch day, he takes off, and the problems began almost immediately. They had very little power, they had limited communications with the ground, and the craft itself was spinning uncontrollably. Seeing how badly it was going already, Soviet leadership on the ground instructed Komarov to nix the mission and just try to come back to Earth. For 5 hours, Komarov circled Earth and attempted to re-enter Earth's atmosphere, but his ship, because of all of those structural problems, didn't work. And so 18 times he attempts to re-enter Earth's atmosphere, but each time it fails. And it was around this time that American intelligence recorded a conversation between a high-ranking Soviet leader on the ground and Komarov. And the leader on the ground is basically crying and saying they're so sorry to Komarov and that he's going to be a hero. They got his wife to come on, and his wife is talking to Komarov, and Komarov's telling her, what to do with the kids, what to do with his estate. He's perfectly fine and healthy, but the craft is doomed, and everybody knows it. Then that call ends, and Komarov, on his 19th attempt, is able to re-enter Earth's atmosphere, which everyone was pretty surprised he could even do that, but his parachutes failed. As Komarov is plunging to his death, over the radio he's cursing the Soviet leadership that doomed him by putting him in a botched spaceship. And so sure enough, on April 24th around 7 a.m., Komarov's craft smashes into the ground, killing Komarov, and when they open it up, it's clear what happened to him. He didn't die on impact. He basically burned alive inside of this capsule as it was careening down towards the Earth. And so all that's left of him is this charred pile. But because Komarov explicitly stated that they had to have an open casket funeral, specifically because he wanted the Soviet leadership to see what they had done to him, they had to hold an open casket funeral with just these charred remains. And here is the famous picture of Komarov's funeral, where the actual Soviet leaders that put him in that spaceship that was doomed, here they are viewing his open casket funeral. So that's going to do it, guys. Let me know in the comments what you thought of these 3 stories, and I will get back to all the early commenters. Plus, I will pin the best comment at the top of the comments section. If you enjoyed and it just seems totally like an advanced trail, they start to wonder, did we veer off the trail? Worried they might be lost, they turned around and began backtracking, hoping to find the trail and find some landmark that would allow them to confirm they were on the right trail. As they're backtracking, not only do they not find the trail, but they don't find any trail. They've managed to go completely off the path. and are now in this kind of random boulder field, but they have no idea where it is on the map. Navigating this terrain in the daytime with light would have been difficult, even for an experienced hiker. But now it's nighttime, they don't have flashlights, and they're jumping boulder to boulder, and Sailor at some point loses her footing and falls and fractures her leg. Brendan rushes over and tries to help Sailor stand up, but she can't move. And so Brendan tries to put her on his shoulders and starts walking with her. And that works for a little while until they're passing by this waterfall and they fall off of it. And they come careening down, they smash onto the ground, they survive the fall, but Brendan now has a broken elbow and Sailor now has a broken ankle on top of her broken leg. Sailor's in excruciating pain, and because of this fall, there's just no way Brendan's going to be able to lift her back up and keep walking. And so the decision was made that Brendan was going to go try to find help on his own, and that she would stay here and continue to be able to help in hopes that someone might hear her before Brendan got back. He takes off, and as soon as he's around the corner and gone, Sailor begins screaming for help, and she would continue screaming for help all through the night, well into the next day. About 24 hours after Brendan had left, he still had not returned, and at this point, Sailor's in and out of consciousness. She knows that she's going downhill quickly unless someone finds her. By the following afternoon, Brendan is still not back yet. So laying face down in the mud with flies buzzing all over her head, she was helpless and trapped, and there was nothing she could do but wait until either a miracle occurred and someone found her, or most likely she just dies. So at the same time that Sailor and Brendan are going through this horrible ordeal, three totally unconnected people decide they want to blow off work and school and just go escape into nature. And so they settle on a hike that would bring them to a waterfall in Santa Barbara, California. Even though this waterfall was a popular tourist attraction, it was very difficult to get to it. It basically required 45 minutes of almost uphill climbing across boulder fields. Very dangerous, and it's not something for a novice hiker to be doing. So they reach the parking lot, they take off on this hike, and when they're just at the base of the waterfall, instead of taking the main trail up to the top, the three hikers decide, let's actually go around off the trail to this pocket of boulders over here where there's a couple of freshwater pools that have formed underneath the base of the waterfall. So they leave the main trail and they're climbing over these huge boulders. It's very dangerous. And at some point, one of the hikers starts taking pictures as they're kind of going across these boulders. Through the viewfinder, as they're taking pictures, they notice something out of the corner of their eye that's in frame. It was like this red flash of something. And so the hiker puts their camera down and she looks down where she sees this red, and she can tell right away that it's someone's hair. It's a girl's dyed red hair. And it was Sailor. The hikers went down to Sailor and they called 911, and they came in, they airlifted her out of there, and Sailor would actually make a full recovery. Unfortunately, Sailor's friend Brendan did not make it. They found his body about 100 meters away from where she had been laying. After the ordeal, the woman who was taking those pictures and had spotted Sailor out of the corner of her eye, she went to her camera and was flicking through some of the pictures she had taken during the hike. She had inadvertently taken a picture of Sailor before they had found her. So had it not been for these hikers being where they were and taking those pictures and noticing her red hair, this picture almost certainly would have become the last picture of Sailor Gilliam's alive. Jolie Callan was this little 4'10", 18-year-old girl from Alabama who, despite her tiny stature, had a huge personality and was incredibly popular. Everybody seemed to love this girl. In 2015, Jolie had just graduated high school and was planning to move away from her town and go to college outside of Alabama, and she was really excited about it. But she had a bit of a problem because she had this boyfriend named Lauren Brunner who she had repeatedly tried to end the relationship with because he was so possessive, but she hadn't been able to successfully break up with him yet. Every time she tried to, he would threaten that he was going to hurt himself or that he was going to hurt her if she ever left him, and so she never quite followed through. But with college on the horizon and to her what felt like this fresh start when she left Alabama, she finally pulled the plug on her relationship with Lauren and made it very clear that they are done. And she was firm on that decision even when Lauren did start lashing out and yelling at her and pleading with her and doing everything he could to win back her affection, but it just wasn't going to work because she had moved on. For weeks, Lauren was trying to convince Jolie to change her mind, but again, Jolie just stayed firm on her decision. And after quite some time, it seemed like Lauren had finally got the message because his messages and cries for her to change her mind had stopped, and there was finally a little bit of distance between the two of them. On August 29th, 2015, Lauren would break that silence and would reach out to Jolie and ask her if she wanted to go for a hike with him, simply as friends. Jolie was naturally hesitant about this, worrying that, this hike as friends could very quickly turn into something more that she didn't want, but she did want to remain friends with Lauren. He was very important to her, and so she reluctantly agrees to go on this hike. After Jolie responded to Lauren that she was willing to go, Lauren was really excited, and so he posted on Instagram this picture of himself looking, I guess, excited. It's hard to tell from the image, but the caption basically said that he was excited about going on this hike with her and that things were, quote, looking up. At the same time, after Jolie had given that answer to Lauren, after she had agreed, yes, I'll go hiking with you, she texted her friend jokingly, if something happens to me, you'll know who I was with. The next day, on August 30th, Lauren picks up Jolie and he begins documenting their trip on his Instagram page. Jolie gets in the car and he takes a picture of her and he captions it, on our way to go hiking. The second image that he uploads is of Jolie walking her dog Kiba in a parking lot. It appears that this lot is at the base of the hike they're about to go on. The third image shows Jolie standing on a rock overlooking this forest, and she's holding her dog Kiba. And it's clear, based on this picture, that now they've actually begun the ascent up this trail. The fourth and final picture that was uploaded to his Instagram page shows Jolie standing on a rocky cliff, and she's holding her own camera up and she's taking pictures out over this valley. And the picture was captioned, Jolie the photographer. Immediately after this picture was taken, Lauren would shoot Jolie twice and push her off of that cliff. He was sentenced to 52 years in jail and bragged to the inmates he was with that if he couldn't have her, no one could. In November of 1961, a wealthy doctor named Arthur Duperrault chartered a luxury yacht called the Bluebell to take he and his family from Fort Lauderdale, Florida to the Bahamas. Along with his family, which was Jean, his wife, his oldest son Brian, who was 14, Terry Jo, who was 11, and Renee, who was 7, Arthur also brought along Julian Harvey, who was a close friend of his that he had hired to be the captain of the ship. And Julian was going to bring along his wife, who was named Mary Dean. And so on November 8th, 1961, the Duperraults and the Harveys set sail on the Bluebell, and by all accounts, their trip was going extremely well. But on the fifth night of the cruise, Terry Jo was down in the sleeping quarters of the Bluebell when she woke up to the sound of stamping sounds and screaming coming from above. She was so scared about what could be going on up there that at first she didn't do anything. But eventually she summoned the courage, got out of her bunk, and she kind of slowly made her way up the stairs and poked her head out onto the deck. And immediately she sees that her family is lying on the ground. They're all deceased. As Terry Jo is frozen in terror, Julian Harvey comes running up to her and tells her to go back down into the sleeping quarters. And so, not knowing any better, she just turns around and runs back down to her bunk. But as she's sitting there, she sees that water is flooding into the Bluebell. She can't stay down here or she's going to drown. So Terry Jo goes back up the steps, she goes onto the main deck, and she sees Julian Harvey, who's standing over the edge of the boat. And she yells to him and says, "Are we sinking?" And he looks at her and he just says, "Yes." And then he promptly jumps over the railing and swims to the lifeboat that had detached from the Bluebell and was drifting away. He climbs onto it and takes off, abandoning her on this sinking ship. Unbeknownst to Terry Jo, was the reason the Bluebell was sinking in the first place was because of Julian Harvey. When he was hired to be the captain of the ship, he used this as an opportunity to bring his new wife out with him and then kill her and collect on her insurance policy. Because in her life insurance policy, there was a clause where he would get double the amount of money if she died in the case of a freak accident. But it's speculated that while he was attacking her, one of the Duperraults had seen him doing it, and so in order to cover his tracks, he had turned on the Duperrault family. And so while it's not entirely clear why he didn't just finish the job with Terry Jo, it seems like when he jumped over the railing and took off with the lifeboat, he must have assumed that Terry Jo was going to sink with the rest of the family, and then there would be no more evidence, no more witnesses. So 11-year-old Terry Jo, as she's standing on this sinking ship, she snaps into action. She remembers seeing a cork float that was pinned up against one of the walls of the ship, and she runs over and she undoes it, she puts it on the water, she climbs on top of it just as the Bluebell sinks under the surface of the water and disappears. And so now she's just stranded out in the middle of the ocean. She's got no food, no water, no shelter from the sun on this little dinky cork float. Over the next couple of days, as she drifted along aimlessly in the ocean, her cork float would begin to disintegrate, and she would have to start positioning her body on the float so there wasn't much weight on it because it was basically beginning to sink. And the only position she could find that worked was by dangling her feet in the water. So she's half on this cork float, half of her body is in the water. And so what began happening is parrotfish began swimming up and biting her toes, her feet, and her legs, but she couldn't do anything about it. She couldn't put her legs on the corkboard or it would sink. After 2 days of balancing precariously on this cork float, the parrotfish disappeared and a bunch of dolphins surrounded her. And later she would go on to say that this was the only part of this horrible ordeal where she felt some sort of comfort. These dolphins just swam around her and almost formed a protective barrier around her that kept the parrotfish away and kept other predators away from her. On November 16th, 1961, 84 hours after the Bluebell had sunk, a Greek freighter actually spotted Terry Jo. Amidst all the whitecaps, they were able to see this little girl on a float, and they drove over, and there she was. And initially, when they went down to try to get her, there was so many sharks swimming around her that they had to be very careful that they didn't accidentally knock her into the water where she might be eaten by sharks. But eventually they were able to get Terry Jo into their basket and pulled her up onto the ship, and she would make a full recovery. As for Julian Harvey, he had made it back to shore and had told authorities that the Bluebell had caught on fire and that everyone had drowned except for him. You know, he had done his best to save them, but he was the only one who could get out. And as luck would have it, he was literally in a police station giving information about what happened when the police were informed that Terry Jo had survived. And the police, they turned to Julian and they say, Terry Jo survived. She's in the hospital. She's going to make a recovery. And Julian was said to have gone totally ashen in the face and then kind of composed himself and said, "Why, that's wonderful." Julian quickly excused himself and fled to a Miami hotel, and the next day he was found dead in his hotel room. This is the picture of Terry Jo that was taken by one of the Greek sailors right when they pulled up alongside her before they pulled her onto their ship. This image would soon appear in publications all over the world. Despite Terry Jo's horrifying ordeal, she would go on to live a very normal life and would have 6 children of her own. So that's going to do it, guys. Let me know what you thought of these 3 stories in the comments, and I will pin the best comment at the top of the comments section. If you enjoyed today's story and you haven't done this already, please cut all the Waldos out of a Where's Waldo book and give that to the like button for their birthday. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram or on Twitter. My username for both is the same. It's JohnBallen416. I also have a ton of content over on TikTok where my username is MrBallen. If you have a story suggestion, please submit it to our subreddit. It's just called MrBallen, and it's linked in the description below. If I intentionally use your story suggestion, I will absolutely credit you. So whether I see you on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support. And until next time, guys, that's going to do it. See ya. Experts believe in the United States alone there are at least 2,000 active, uncaught serial killers just running wild. Which means if you live in America, you may have already had an interaction with a serial killer. You just didn't know it. But today, I'm going to share 3 progressively more disturbing cases of Americans that had an interaction with a serial killer, but came to find out later that it was a serial killer. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all I do, and I upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, then please schedule the like button for a fight with Paul on the day before Thanksgiving in Quincy, Massachusetts. Also, please subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. After spending 21 years in the U.S. Army, a man retires and moves to Central Florida with his wife and young son. Although his family had plenty of money because he had a pension coming in and his wife still worked full-time, he just got bored really quickly after moving to Central Florida and decided he would just take a job doing something just to stay occupied. And so he ended up taking a job at a highway gas station. One of the primary reasons he chose this particular job is because the owners of the gas station didn't care if his son came along to help him stock shelves and hang out behind the cash register. And so for years, that's just how it went. The man would work at the gas station and his son would tag along. Even after his son became a teenager and you'd think might be wanting to do other things, well, the town was so small, there was almost nothing to do. So his son still came along well into his teenage years. One night in 1990, his son, who was 15 years old at the time, was at the station and he was actually taking a break sitting outside on a picnic table. He was reading a magazine, drinking a Mountain Dew, and it's dark out, and he notices out of the corner of his eye that there is a woman walking off of the highway towards the gas station. It was a very quiet night at the time, so there's no cars getting gas, there's nobody there, and there's not really anybody even driving on the highway, and so that's why she really stood out to him. And he turns and he notices her and he thinks to himself, no one ever walks to our gas station. We're on a highway. Everybody drives here. So she must have broken down and she must be coming here to try to use her phone to call a tow truck or something like that. So the woman is walking across the lot, coming closer and closer to the gas station, and the boy at this point has turned his attention back to his magazine, but he would say later that he kept looking up and keeping an eye on her because there was something off about her. The woman ultimately walks right behind him and goes in the door into the gas station. Doesn't acknowledge the boy, doesn't say hi to him, just walks straight inside, and she starts walking up and down the aisles of the gas station. Now, from where the boy was sitting, it's all glass, so he could clearly look in and see his father behind the counter, and he could see the head of this woman as she walked in and around all these aisles. And as soon as the woman was in the store, kind of pacing around the aisles, the boy put his magazine down and was just watching. And he noticed that she was not really shopping. She was just looking down for a few seconds, wouldn't pick anything up, so she wasn't buying anything. And she would look up at the counter where his father was, and she would just stare at him, and then she'd look back down at what she was doing, and she would go through all the aisles. And at some point, the woman just kind of abandons this phony, I'm pretending to shop routine, and just walks up to the counter. Now, nobody else is in the store. There's nobody else coming in. And so the boy could actually fairly clearly hear what she was saying to his father. And she told his father that she had broken down and she needed a ride, and could he drive her to Ocala, which was the next big town north of this gas station. And the boy would say that his father acted very strangely because his father is normally incredibly pleasant with all the customers. He's very chatty even. Like, he talks to everybody who comes in the store. But as soon as this woman had gone in, his dad had seemed kind of dismissive and almost rude to this woman, and when she was talking to him, asking for a ride, he just said, no, I won't give you a ride. The woman is annoyed by how quickly she's been shot down, but instead of just taking no for an answer, she turns and looks at the boy who's sitting out on the bench, who's looking right at her, and she points at the boy, and she says, what about him? Is he your son? Can he give me a ride? The boy notices that his father, who's not within her eyesight, is looking at his son going, no. Like, whatever she wants from you, you're going to say no to it. And the boy's a little bit confused by this because he's still trying to understand why his dad was so against helping this woman, because she clearly needs our help or someone's help. But he just took his dad at face value. And when the woman's pointing at him, he knew, the boy, that if she came over and asked him, he would say no. But it wouldn't come to that because the boy's father would say to the woman, no, my son's not going to give you a ride. You need to leave here immediately. Do not come back. Leave. We're not going to help you. She's furious. She's cussing him out. She storms out and slams the door. She starts cussing at the boy, and she walks off. The whole time she's turning around and flipping them off and screaming profanities at them, but she ultimately walks off, and the dad kind of followed her out and is standing next to his son as she walks off. And the boy asks his dad, like, what was her deal? Why did that happen? Why did you not want to help her? And the dad just said, I don't know. There was something off about her, and I don't know how to place it, but I did not want her around you. I knew I didn't want to give her a ride. I knew she had to go. A year later, the boy is in his room when he hears his dad in the other room yelling for him to come in here and look at the TV. So he runs into the TV room, and on the TV is the same woman from the gas station, better known as Eileen Wuornos. She was a serial killer who used to pick up her male victims at gas stations in Florida. It's unclear whether the boy or the boy's father were her next victims. But by the time she had shown up at that gas station, she'd already killed 4 people. And following that interaction with them at the gas station, she had gone on to kill 3 more people, including someone in Ocala, Florida, which was the town she had asked them to give her a ride to. Eileen had been caught, that's why she was on TV, and she was later sentenced to death. In the late 1970s, a medical student going to school in Chicago had just gotten out of class and decided he didn't want to pay for a taxi, so he decided he would hitchhike his way home. Now, this was something he routinely did, and at the time was socially acceptable. So he goes down to the road and he puts his thumb out, and eventually a car pulls up, and he would describe the man that is pulling up as looking normal and even friendly and lighthearted. It's a middle-aged guy, and he tells the student, "Hey, come on in, hop inside, I'll give you a ride." The student did not feel threatened by this guy and felt like overall this was safe, and so he hops in the passenger seat. He tells this man where he wants to go. He says, okay, and they start driving off. So as they're driving, it's silent in the car. They're not making chit-chat. They're just driving along. And the student notices that the man misses the turn to go where he needs to go. So the student turns to the man and says, hey, you missed the turn. Do you mind turning around and going back this way? Or, if you want, you can just drop me off here and I'm happy to walk. We're not that far away. The man, who had seemed really nice and lighthearted, suddenly had this really intense demeanor come over him. And he turns and looks at the student and goes, "Oh no, you're coming with me." The student is frozen in fear. He doesn't know what to do, but he knows immediately that this is not an idle threat. I don't know who he is, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be bad for me. I have to get out. And so as soon as the car began to slow down even a little bit, they're still driving, they're not stopped. The student unlocks the door, opens the car, and jumps out of the moving car and smashes into the ground, rolls against the side of the curb, but is ultimately unhurt. He's banged up from jumping out of a moving car, but he was able to stand up and run back to his house. He didn't call the police because he really didn't know what to tell them, because he didn't have a great description of the guy, he didn't have his license plate, and the guy didn't do anything totally aggressive. It was more of a threat, but an ambiguous threat at best. It wasn't really clear what he wanted to do with him. It definitely did not seem good, but it just wasn't enough for him to call the police. And so the student just feels lucky that he got out of there and moves on with his life. A couple of years go by. The student at this point has basically forgotten about this encounter with the stranger. And he's sitting in a cafe, he's drinking some coffee, and there's a TV on behind him. He wasn't paying attention to it, but the reporter on the TV said something that immediately piqued his interest. The reporter was talking about a guy that was currently on death row that apparently had removed all of the inside car door handles inside of his car after his first would-be victim, a college student, had apparently escaped by opening a car door while he was moving. The student runs over to the TV and sees on the screen there is an image of the guy they're talking about, this guy on death row, and it's the same guy who gave him a ride 2 years earlier. His name was John Wayne Gacy, aka the Killer Clown. He had killed over 30 men and boys in Chicago, and then after killing them in his clown room, he would stuff them into a secret crawl space in his basement. And although we can't be certain, it seems extremely likely that this med student was supposed to be the first victim of John Wayne Gacy, but he leapt out of the car, forcing John Wayne Gacy to change his strategy and make sure the next person was not able to do that. In the 1970s, a young woman and young man were on their very first date together, and it wasn't going very well. It wasn't going badly, it was just really, really awkward. They just were not meshing at all. And so as they're getting ready to leave and retire for the night, the guy is thinking to himself, I have nothing to lose here, we're probably not gonna go on a second date. And he says to the woman, hey, do you want to not go home right now and actually come on a hike with me? And he goes, I know this sounds like a terrible idea, but hear me out. I go mountain climbing in this area called Provo Canyon. It's not that far from here. There are these beautiful trails that lead up the side of the canyon to these amazing scenic overlooks. And tonight it's a new moon, so there's great visibility. And I just think that you might enjoy it. And so at first, the woman is obviously a little bit hesitant. But when he says, look, I go hiking there at night all the time. I love it out there. And I promise if there's any weirdness, if you don't like being there, we'll just turn around and leave. It's totally safe. And so after a little bit of coaxing, she finally says, okay, you know what? That sounds fun. Let's go do it. And so their date that had been really awkward suddenly became really exciting. And the two of them were kind of like thrilled, like, wow, look at us making our way up for a nighttime hike through Provo Canyon. And so they arrive at the mouth of this canyon, and they're both obviously excited, and they hop out and they start walking up this trail that brings them into a heavily forested section of the canyon. Now, to this point, the guy felt like this was a really great idea. He really had gone hiking here a bunch, and he really did know the area well. But as the trail brought them into the forested area, the guy remembers feeling this overwhelming sense of dread. He didn't know why, it was just like an overwhelming sense of anxiety that something bad was going to happen to them. But he had worked so hard to convince his date to come with him. and had convinced her it was safe, that he's not about to let on to her that there was anything wrong with what they were doing. And so he put on, his strong face and just kind of suppressed it and just kept on walking and, holding her hand tight, and they just continued their walk. But his sense of dread would just build and build to the point where he was really on edge. And what he didn't know, but would find out later, is that his date, the woman, she also had this horrible sense of dread as soon as they went into the forest. But she didn't want to tell him because she didn't want to seem like a party pooper, because he seemed really excited about it. At some point, as they're walking down this path, the man steps on something that felt soft. He didn't know what it was, but it caused him to freeze immediately. And he's holding her hand. It kind of jerks her to get her to stop. And before he can even look down and see what he's standing on, he hears rustling coming from the bushes just off the trail. She hears it too, and both of them, without saying a word to each other, because again, you got to remember, they're both really stressed. They haven't let on to the other how stressed they are, but they're both basically ready to leave. And so the two of them turn around and they hightail it out of there. He has no idea what he stepped on. They don't know what they heard in the bushes, but they don't care. The anxiety was so high, they just wanted to leave. Years later, that man and woman who had this very strange date would actually be married. And they'd be sitting down watching TV together, and they're flipping through the channels, and they land on an interview with a death row inmate. And the interviewer is asking the inmate, was there ever a time that you were almost caught red-handed? And the guy being interviewed says, yes, one time. I was in the forest up in Provo Canyon one night, and a young couple came walking up the trail. I didn't see them, so I only had a chance to jump into the bushes right next to the trail, and the guy actually stepped on the body of a girl I had just killed. But for some reason, he didn't look down and see what he was standing on, and the two of them didn't notice me just a few feet away from them. They just turned around and walked away. Turns out that young couple had run into one of the worst serial killers of all time, Ted Bundy. Before Bundy was executed, he confessed to over 30 murders, but many people believe the true number of victims is much, much, much higher. So that's going to do it, guys. Let me know what you thought of these 3 stories in the comments section, and let me know how you would respond if it turned out you had actually interacted with a serial killer. Not only will I respond to all the early commenters, I will also pin the best comment at the top of the comment section. If you enjoyed today's story and you haven't done this already, please schedule the like button for a fight with Paul the day before Thanksgiving in Quincy, Massachusetts. Also, please subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram or on Twitter. My username for both platforms is the same. It's JohnBallen416. I also have a ton of content over on TikTok where my username is MrBallen. If you have a story suggestion, please submit it to our subreddit. It's just called MrBallen. It's linked in the description below. I am on there every day, and if I intentionally use one of your story suggestions, I will absolutely credit you. So whether I see you on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, here on YouTube, or some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support. And until next time, guys, that's going to do it. See ya. Today, I'm going to share with you 3 progressively more disturbing stories, and at the end of each of them, I'm going to share with you the video that is famously associated with them. But before I get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered traveling on land at about 15 miles an hour, meaning it would be sitting over the areas it was devastating for longer amounts of time, making it even worse than some of the worst predictions that meteorologists had for this tornado. 15 minutes later, at 7:30 p.m., 84-year-old Fairgale resident Clem Schultz and his wife Jerry Schultz, they were at home because they had decided to ride out the storm. As Clem is sitting in the living room watching the Weather Channel, kind of waiting for the last possible second to go into their basement, he hears his wife yell out from the kitchen to come in here and look at this. So Clem goes into the kitchen and she's pointing out the back window, and he looks out and he sees this massive tornado coming right at them. It's less than a mile away, and it is way bigger than he thought it was going to be. But from their perspective, because the tornado was spinning counterclockwise, it kind of looked like it was spinning away from town into this empty field. And Clem says to his wife Jerry, you know what, it looks like it's going to miss us, but we're probably going to lose power, so I'm going to go up into the attic and get some lanterns ready. So Jerry stays in the kitchen, Clem goes up into the attic, and as he's fishing to get out the lanterns, he hears what sounds like a freight train barreling through town, and he had this little window at the edge of his attic, so he goes over and he looks out, and the tornado had not veered off into the open field. It had continued straight towards his house, and it was ripping off roofs right in front of him. And he figured, I don't have enough time to go down into the basement. I have no time to do anything. So he takes out his phone and he begins recording. Clem's house, along with all the others in that video, collapsed. And initially, Clem thought he had died because it went totally quiet and it was totally dark, and he actually said out loud, "Am I dead?" But it was the pain in his back from a crushed vertebrae that told him, no, you survived. And he begins to kind of pull himself out of the rubble, and before long, a neighbor is pulling him out. And as soon as he's out of the rubble of his house, he looks around, and his whole community is pretty much gone. And as he's standing there kind of bewildered, his neighbor says, "Clem, don't look down." And Clem says, "Why?" And his neighbor says, "Because your wife is under you and she's dead." When the dust had finally settled, not only had Clem's wife been killed, but Clem's neighbor had been killed as well, because the tornado went directly through their two houses. That video that Clem shot is now used to educate people on how dangerous tornadoes really are, and how anytime a tornado is coming through your area, never go outside to film it, seek shelter. On Sunday, February 12th, 2017, Abigail Williams was over her best friend, Liberty German's house for a sleepover. Abby and Libby were 13 and 14 respectively. That night, as they're laying in bed, they were looking out the window hoping they saw snowflakes come down, because there was apparently this huge storm that was going to roll through the next day, and they were hoping that if it did, school would be canceled the next day. But when they woke up the next morning, it hadn't even snowed. However, they found out that in Delphi, Indiana, where they lived, school had been canceled preemptively in anticipation of this big storm that never really amounted to anything. So the girls got a free day off where they could actually go outside and enjoy it. So the girls start talking about how they're going to spend their extra day off. And Libby suggests, well, why don't we go check out the Monon High Bridge? It was this abandoned bridge that crossed over the stream, and a lot of their classmates would take pictures on it and post it to their social media, and the girls figured this is a great day to go do that. So Libby asks her grandmother, Becky, who was her primary caretaker, if it would be okay if they went for a hike over near this bridge. Becky gives them permission, but with the caveat that they would find their own ride there and back. So Libby convinces her older sister Kelsey to give them a ride there, and Libby speaks to her father, Derek, and he says he can pick them up, but he'd only be able to pick them up at a very specific time, which would only give the girls a couple of hours at the bridge, but they thought that was fine and that was plenty of time. So a couple hours later, at about 1:30 in the afternoon, Kelsey drops off the two girls at the start of the trail that's going to bring them to this bridge. We know the girls made it to the bridge because at 2:07 p.m., Libby posted a picture to her social media of Abby walking across the bridge. At 3:11 p.m., Libby's father, Derek, texted her and said, "Hey, I'm going to be there in a minute. Just want to make sure you guys are there to meet me." And she didn't text Derek back, and Derek would later say that that was pretty unusual for her. At 3:14 p.m., Derek arrives at the meeting spot, and the girls are nowhere to be found. And so Derek tries calling. There's no answer. He texts his daughter, no response. And so he ends up calling Becky, Libby's grandmother, his mother, and says, "Hey, did the girls contact you and change plans about where I was picking them up or when?" And Becky said, "No, I haven't heard from them. They said they'd be there at 3. They should be there now. I haven't heard from them." And Derek says he can't get in touch with them. So for the next 10 minutes, Becky and her husband, Mike, Libby's grandfather, just try calling over and over and over again to the girls, but nothing's going through. They can't get them to respond to text messages. So Mike leaves and meets up with Derek in the parking lot, and the two of them begin walking the trail to try to find these girls. At this point, the family's not suspecting foul play. They're thinking, the girls probably got lost, or they lost track of time, or their phones just ran out of batteries, or maybe they did get hurt and they can't move, but it's probably not that serious. They're creating scenarios in their head to rationalize what's happening. But by the time the sun went down at about 5 p.m. and there was still no sign of these girls, they ended up calling the police and officially reporting the girls missing. By 6 p.m. that night, there is this massive search combing the trail looking for these girls, but all night they're looking everywhere with hundreds of searchers and there's no sign of them. The following day, on Tuesday, February 14th, one of the searchers was about a half mile away from the bridge where the girls have been taking those pictures, and they discovered the girls' bodies right next to a creek. The police didn't release their cause of death. However, they said, without a doubt, this is a homicide, because apparently the scene was incredibly disturbing and had at least 2 or 3 signatures. Signatures are things done to the victims that are above and beyond what is required to end their life. Things like writing on the victims or their body position, or much, much worse. And usually you only see signatures when you're dealing with a serial killer. 3 days after the bodies were discovered, police were able to extract some video from Libby's phone. It turns out when Libby was taking those pictures of Abby on the bridge and had just posted it to social media, apparently this guy had come on the bridge and Libby must have sensed danger and she began filming him. Now, there is apparently a video that starts from the bridge and lasts all the way through the girls' final moments, but the police would release a very small snippet of this recording because it showed who they believe is the killer walking towards them with his hands in his pockets looking down, and he says to them, "Guys, down the hill." Guys, down the hill. Guys, down the hill. Despite thousands of tips pouring in as soon as this video was made public, they still don't know who this guy is, no arrests have been made, and the case remains unsolved. Before The Bachelorette pitted 30 men against each other to win one woman's heart, Americans watched another show about random strangers competing for a mate. It was called The Dating Game. Starting in 1965, this reality show featured a woman asking 3 men questions without seeing their faces, and based on their answers, at the end of the show, she would choose one to go on a date with. On the surface, the September 13th, 1978 showing of The Dating Game looks like every other episode with lots of unsubtle innuendo, but this episode would go down in history as a one-of-a-kind, and not in a good way. At the end of this particular show, it was time for the Bachelorette, Cheryl Bradshaw, to make her decision, and she would choose Bachelor number 1, who would turn out to be this tall, good-looking, long-haired guy whose name was Rodney. Rodney comes around the partition, and they see each other for the first time, and everybody laughs, and they hug, and the show looks like every other show, and on stage, Rodney looks like every other contestant that's ever been on the show. But after the show ended and Cheryl and Rodney went backstage and actually began having a real conversation that was not being filmed, Cheryl would say that Rodney completely changed. He became incredibly creepy and was saying things like, "I always get the girl." And then at some point he says, "Hey, you should come out with me tonight. It'll be a date you'll never forget." And she turns to him and just says, no thanks. This would turn out to be a really wise decision because Rodney was a horrible, horrible person. Had the show done a background check on Rodney, they would have discovered that he assaulted an 8-year-old and went to jail for 3 years for it and was currently on parole. But even if they had done a background check on Rodney, the check would not have discovered what he did at night. Rodney was shamelessly cocky and self-confident, and unlike a lot of men, he had no issue walking right up to any woman anywhere and flirting with her. And he used that to his advantage. He would go up to women in bars and he would convince them that he was a fashion photographer and that they were so beautiful, would you come back to my apartment and do a photo shoot with me? And just like Cheryl on the dating show, these women were immediately kind of charmed by him and would say yes. Once they got back to his apartment, he would shut and lock the door and then become that creepy guy that Cheryl saw backstage. But unlike Cheryl, who at the time she saw this just said, I'm not interested, and was able to leave, these women were trapped. And then whether they wanted to or not, they would do a photo shoot with him and then he would strangle them to death. Because Rodney Alcala was not your typical dating game contestant. He was a serial killer who, by the time he stepped foot on that show and was chosen by Cheryl Bradford to win the game, he had already killed 4 people. And over a 2-year period, he killed as many as 130 people, which, if you're doing the math, is over those 2 years, he was killing at least 1 person a week. Alcala was finally apprehended and he was sentenced to death. Here are some highlights from Rodney Alcala's episode of The Dating Game.
And we're going to start by having them say hello to you and see how they sound. Number 1, would you say hello to Cheryl, please? We're going to have a great time together, Cheryl. Okay, and here we go.
Bachelor number 1.
Yes.
What's your best time?
The best time is at night, nighttime,
Why do you say that?
because that's the only time there is.
The only time? What's wrong with morning, afternoon?
Well, they're okay, but nighttime's when it really gets good.
Bachelor number 1. I am serving you for dinner.
Oh,
What are you called and what do you look like?
I'm called the banana, and I look really good.
Can you be a little more descriptive?
Peel me. I'm going to ask you a question. Will that date be bachelor number 1, bachelor number 2, or bachelor number 3? Who gets the dates?
Well, I like bananas, so I'll take 1.
Number 1, bachelor number 1, all right. He's a skydiver, so he's got a lot of nerve. He's into motorcycling. He's also a fine photographer. Say hello to Rodney Alcala. Rodney, come on and say hello. Congratulations, Rod. You did it with a 1 answer.
So that's going to do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and I will pin the best comment at the top of the comments section. If you enjoyed today's video and you haven't done this already, please offer to give the like button a ride home from soccer practice, but don't show up. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram or on Twitter. My username is the same for both platforms. It's just JohnBallen416. I also have a ton of content over on TikTok. My username over there is MrBallen. If you have a story suggestion, please submit it to our subreddit just called MrBallen. It's linked in the description below. So whether I see you on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, or some combination, I just really appreciate your support. And until next time, guys, that's going to do it. See ya.